Hi, and welcome to today's live reading from Murder in Prospect, an Eve Sawyer mystery by Jane Suen, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue 1. He loved all of her, from the top of her head, long golden locks tumbled past her slender neck and across exquisitely rounded shoulders. Her petite frame tapered at a trim waist, then widened to accommodate bony hips attached to shapely legs, slim ankles, and dainty feet. But it was her hazel eyes that melted his heart, the gateway to her and that she'd opened up to him. He could go there, to the place that was his, and hers, theirs. He remembered the scent of fresh rain and roses and sassafras that was uniquely hers. He could smell it now, his nose buried in the soft skin of her graceful neck, inhaling her fragrance. She had asked him if he loved her, shining eyes, trusting and sparkling, yet fragile and childlike. They had kissed, and she drew her head back, looking straight into his eyes for his answer. Every cell in his body wanted to scream his love. Yet something held him back. It wasn't so simple. To promise that was to give his eternal vow. A voice whispered inside his head. He'd have to live with the guilt. He glimpsed the flicker of pain and disappointment in her expressive eyes before her eyelids dropped. The moment was gone. He knew instinctively that he had made a fatal mistake, and one that hurt to the depths of her soul. He reached out, but it was too late. She twirled around and dashed out the door. It was a few days later that the mailman delivered her letter. It was dated that day, the last time they'd meet. Prologue 1 or 2. The man had scouted the location and parked his reliable old diesel down the street from the house, where he could watch the front door and wait. For the fifth day in a row, like clockwork, the door opened right on schedule, and a figure in a long sleeved top and loose pants exited the house to jog down the driveway, past a parked car, before turning left onto the street away from him. He stepped out of his car, hair tied underneath a cap, wearing a black zip-up hoodie and dark jeans. Closing the car door quietly while he took out a pocket knife, he walked calmly toward the vehicle in the driveway. The man stood still and scanned the area, then crouched down on the paved ground and slid under the car. He worked quickly, finding the brake line, and nicked the brake hose, not severing it, just enough for the brake fluid to trickle out. He left before the jogger got back. Chapter 1. I had 30 minutes between classes today, enough time for a quick break. I stopped at the student center, which was on my travel path to my next class. I zoomed across the atrium, straight to the new coffee shop where they made delicious hot chocolate with an espresso machine. I couldn't get enough of it, even though I was a coffee kind of girl. I had timed it down to a science. It was my routine now, a middle of the week treat. Hey, Eve, a man's deep voice called out from behind me. I turned around with a smile, recognizing the familiar voice and the face to go with it. Hi, Bob, I said. How's it going? I had seen little of Bob Harding this semester, and we didn't have any classes together. Cassie had invited him to house sit with the three of us, her, Randall, and I, at her aunt's house over the Christmas holiday, but Bob had plans already and politely declined. I'd been meaning to catch up with him, but I got busy with school and dropped the ball. You got a minute? He asked. This man didn't waste words, but there was something different about him. I sensed a somberness and a weight that pushed his voice even deeper. Your hot chocolate is ready, said the barista at the register. I grabbed my drink and dropped a tip in the jar. I have about 25 minutes. We can sit and talk, I said. Bob nodded as I took my cup and headed to a small table tucked in the corner. I wondered why he was all serious and what was on his mind. Bob was the guy who everyone thought of as a solid, dependable, and certainly not the kind that rushed to judgment. He didn't want he didn't wear his feelings on his sleeve and kept his emotions in check. This tall and dark-haired man with a deep voice to match. I remembered how steady, calm, and reassuring he was when we worked together on cases at Lolly Beach and around Route 82. He kept us cool, even when there was a murder. But there was something off today. The somber look on his face brought a feeling of unease over me. He dealt with life and death situations, and he was a rock for all of us. I just couldn't imagine anything or anyone throwing Bob off his tracks. This had to be a big deal for him. I watched him move toward me. Even his walk was slightly unsteady, as if each stride wasn't perfectly in sync. He walked slower, too, and when he sat down across the table, the frown on his forehead deepened. Been busy? I asked lightly. He shook his head, as if that wasn't it. Bob kept his eyes down, staring at the container kept between his hands, the steam curling and rising. I sometimes take coffee, I said, feeling a silent lull. I'm into their hot chocolate now. Gotta try it if you haven't. I ended my sentence lamely, hoping he'd tell me. I knew it wouldn't do any good to push him too hard. It never worked with Bob. He'd talk when he was good and ready, and he seemed almost ready just then. Had he changed his mind? What was so important a few minutes ago that he wanted to talk to me? I reached out and nudged his arm. It was the only thing I could think to do. If he wanted to talk, I was here and ready. He looked up and sighed. You know why I didn't spend winter break with you guys? I shook my head, thinking about the house sitting we did at Fool's Lane and the man hanging from the tree. Yeah, you said you couldn't make it because you had plans already. Yes, that's right. He ran his thumb around the cup's rim, pausing for a moment. I went home to see my Uncle Will. I held my breath and waited for more. I knew Bob's uncle had raised him after his parents died. He invited me back home to spend the holidays. Did you have a good Christmas? We had a quiet celebration at home, just the two of us. We'd agreed on no gifts. You spent time with your uncle. You gave him the gift of time, which is the most precious than wrapped presents. He nodded, but he was holding something back. But you want to talk to me about something else? No. I mean, yes. He squeezed his eyes. It's my uncle. He wasn't his old self. Words weren't exactly flowing. Whatever was bothering him was stuck inside, and I was determined to pull it out gently. Why wasn't he talking? We'd been friends and had faced danger together, and had seen death in front of us. I couldn't just leave him like this, even if it meant skipping my next class. Bob wasn't just anyone. I watched as he took another sip of his coffee. Yes, I'd give him all the time he needed. He'd been there for me. We had each other's backs. So, what's this about your uncle? My uncle is dead. I heard the words uttered abruptly, enunciated with finality. Questions immediately ran through my mind. I didn't know how old Will was. Was he close to Bob's father's age? Or much younger? Or older? Did he die quietly of old age? At home? Was anyone with him when he passed? Was it a natural death? Foul play? What exactly happened? I wondered if Bob was still in shock. I managed to say, I'm so sorry, holding back those questions on the tip of my tongue. I didn't want to pry, as Bob was a private about his personal matters and rarely spoke of his family. I knew he had been a child when his parents passed, and he had no siblings. Maybe that had something to do with it. He didn't speak, letting the emptiness fill the air. Was it during Christmas when you were there? No, it was after the holidays. After you came back to school, I whispered. He gave a slight nod. And that's the last time I saw him, during winter break. Was there a memorial service? No, he always said he didn't want one, just give him a decent burial. Did you attend? Yes, I went home on Friday and flew back. The burial was on Saturday. I left right after that. His eyes stared up. Sorry for your loss, I whispered. I thought back to the tragic death of Meade Parker during the winter break. Cassie, Randall, and I had found him hanging from a tree in the backyard of the house where we were staying. Bob had been spared that tragedy. Little did he know that he would be dealing with a death in his family, someone close to him and his father figure. Maybe he thought he could share it with me now, since we had been involved in murder cases. Maybe he trusted me since we were friends. If talking about it helped, that was the least I can do. Death was the hardest thing for the living. Eve, I have to go back. I cocked my head. Go back where? Spring break starts next week on Saturday. To pay your respects at the grave? There's something else I have to do. He left me some things. A shoebox tied with a string with my name on it. I sensed he struggled with something else. And that's it? I don't know yet. Well, we'll be on break the entire week, plus the Saturday before and the Sunday after. That's 9 days. I'm leaving Friday afternoon after my morning exam. He paused to look me in the eye. I hitched a breath, sensing his intensity and urgency. He was deadly serious. You need my help, I said. Come with me to Colorado, please. I don't understand what's going on. How can I help you? I can't put my finger on it, but something does not feel right. I need you to look into this. Find out what's going on. Do you have anything concrete? No, he said. No proof, not yet. Bob was a friend in need, and he was in grief and had lost the only family he had left. I did a quick check on my schedule for next week. My last exam was on Thursday afternoon. I'm free, but Mom has been expecting me to go home and see her on spring break. I need to call her first. I pulled out my phone and held it in the palm of my hand, like, hold on, as I stood up and moved away to find a quiet spot to talk. Mom answered on the first ring. I told her about Bob's invite, and she asked me if I wanted to go. I was torn between helping him and wanting to make up for the time I was away at full swing over the winter break. She brought up my sleuthing skills in solving murder cases and that she knew I couldn't say no to someone's cry for help. Mom and I discussed this before a decision was made. The call finished, and I walked back to the table. Bob stared at me like he was anxious and waiting. I'm coming with you. He slumped and sighed in relief, and then smiled like I had just delivered the best news. Good. I'll book the plane and get us 2 tickets to fly out on Friday afternoon. Okay. I'll text you the flight info, Bob said. I'll come by and pick you up. I'll be ready.